Hey guys, it's Bridget with San Diego Seed Company, and I want to talk about something the new gardeners have a lot of trouble with, and I get it. I did too in the beginning. When do you thin your plants, or what happens when you sow them too closely together and they're really crowded? Well, it's a big learning curve for new gardeners, but I want to help you go through that process a little bit easier with a couple of tips and tricks, okay? So first, let's look at the difference between plants that are planted with adequate spacing and those that are overcrowded. I've got a nice flat here of calendula, and you can see the difference. The calendula that is planted with one seed per cell is way bigger than the calendula that accidentally got overseeded. So you can see here, there's 3 plants in here, and look how tiny they are compared to the ones that just got 1 seed per square or area. Now, it's important that you note that difference. These were all planted at the exact same time. However, the ones that are overcrowded are almost half the size. That's because they're fighting for nutrients, for space, for water. They're just overcrowded. Now, this is a common thing to do, especially with really tiny seeds, because it's really hard to put 1 seed per each little tiny square. Now, luckily, there is a way that you can make up for this issue, and that's called thinning, or also sometimes they call it pricking out. That's when you thin a plant, but then you actually take that plant and you transplant it into another area. I like using a paring knife. Why? It's easy, I can scoop in there, they're cheap, I can leave it in the greenhouse. So here's a good example. We'll take this guy here. So we got 1, 2, 3 plants. You have 2 choices. You can either simply pluck out 2 of them and let one grow big and healthy, or you can actually move these other 2 so that you keep all 3 of them. The way I'll do that is I'm gonna take my paring knife and I'm gonna pull them all out. Look at that, look at all those roots, okay? Now I want you to note that the soil is not really moist, it's actually a little dry, which is gonna make it easier for me to pull these guys apart. Now look at it, I can pull this almost perfectly apart. So here's 1, 2, look how long those roots are, and 3. So I've got 3 plants here that I actually can save and plant into different squares. So I'm gonna take this guy here, he's got really long roots, and I'm actually going to transplant him into his own little spot here. And I'm gonna do the same with these guys. Just poking a hole here and I'm putting them in there. I'm trying to keep as much of those roots intact as I can. Bam, now looky there. I took 3 crowded ones and I planted them out so that they're gonna be able to grow a lot quicker in their own space. Now, I can do this because I'm inside my greenhouse. I have high humidity. The temperature is, what are we sitting at? It's about 60 degrees. It'll get a little bit warmer today. And they're also protected from the direct sunlight. You would never want to do this process and put them in the direct sunlight, because you disturb the roots and then they're gonna get hit with the sun. They're likely to wilt and not be very happy. So I'm gonna water these really well and let them set for a few days. Once the roots are established, I can actually plant these out in my garden. All right, the process I just explained about splitting up your plants, you don't have to do just in a greenhouse. Let's say you're direct sowing in the garden and you get a little heavy-handed with the seeds and the plants are way too close together. You can do the exact same process in the garden with your direct sown plants. So here's a really good example. Here's some direct sown lettuce, and you can tell there's some spots where it's really close together. In fact, right here, this is our Paris Island romaine, and these plants need much more spacing than they're gonna get. So I have 2 choices. I either can pluck this out and eat it, or if I want it to get bigger, I can simply transplant it to a different area where maybe the seeds didn't sprout. So again, we're gonna use the paring knife just because it's an easy tool. You could use a spade or anything. I just love the way these kind of cut down into the soil. And I'm just going to come in here, I'm just gonna cut it out, just like that. Use my little fork. Bam, look at that, nice little transplant, and I'm gonna move it over here where it has adequate spacing to grow. So it's as simple as that. I can go in here and take any of these crowded plants out and move them to areas where they'll have more space to grow. And that's all it takes. Now, keep in mind, the big difference between doing this outdoor and indoors is right here, we're full sun. Now, luckily it's cool weather, but if it's gonna get really hot, I would put shade cloth up to protect your plants that you just transplanted. And I would ensure that there's adequate moisture in the soil. So you can tell that with my drip line, I've already watered this morning to make sure that these are adequately moist. And then I might even go in with the hose after I transplant them and hit them one more time, because I did disturb their roots a little bit. And so you just want to make sure that they don't get wilted in the full sun. So that's how you take advantage of areas of overcrowded plants and spread them out for a bountiful harvest.